This episode of Bulletproof Cash Flow is brought to you by Realty Dynamics. Learn how people like you can build substantial passive income while creating wealth for the long term through real estate investing. Visit rdyne.com. That's RDYNE.com.
If you're talking to someone and their body's facing you, but their feet are facing somewhere else, usually the exit, that means you're boring the shit out of them and they want to get out of there. So if the feet are facing, they're interested and you've got their attention. If they're facing away, you don't have their attention. You got to fix it or you'll be done. Crossing, if you're sitting next to someone and they cross their legs, I love to watch this in a bar when I'm watching a date, two people sitting at the bar. If someone crosses their leg where the thigh is between you and them, that means they're not comfortable. They're blocking you. If they cross their leg and they're open to you, usually they'll turn their body to you, and that means they're interested in what you're saying.
Working because you want to, not because you have to, is financial freedom. And we want to help you create that. Welcome to the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. We're going to teach you how to achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host is a multifamily syndicator and property developer. He's done deals reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars. You'll hear from experts in all aspects of real estate investment, finance, development, and management. Everything you need is right here. This is the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. And this is your host, Augustino Pintus.
Quick question. How'd you find this show? Maybe a tweet or an Instagram post? Well, no ads here. Just a small favor to ask. If someone introduced you to this podcast, pass it on. Share, review, tell a friend. It means the world to me. Thanks a ton. Hey everyone, it's Augustino. Understanding when you're putting a deal together, understanding who your seller is, who your buyer is, will tell you a lot about whether you have their attention, okay? And what you're saying, if it's landing, and if it's not landing. Because here's the thing, if what you're saying does not really get conveyed to the individual listening, you're going to have a hard time getting them over the line and getting them to transact, which in the real estate business is a big deal, right? And how do you do that? One big telltale sign is through the use of body language. Now, our next guest knows all about this. He is an award-winning author and sales trainer with over 30 years of experience helping companies close more deals. He's been featured on over 100 shows for his insights on sales, specifically on writing LOIs, on getting in front of people and really closing those deals and helping transactions happen. Now, he sees many people, they just fail because they don't focus on who the individual is and what will resonate with them to get them over the line and actually transact. So to that end, he advises many groups out there on how to get people to buy or sell to you. Okay, so his wisdom will help many, many, many real estate investors out there seal more deals. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome Allan Langer to the show. Allan, buddy, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, Agostino, this is great to be back. It's been a few years.
It certainly has. Now, guys, if you like what Allan has to say, you can reach out to his website at allanger.com. Link in the description, okay? So, Allan, go ahead and maybe start off by telling listeners a little bit about your backstory and how you got into this whole thing about reading body language and why it's important.
Well, like you said, close to 30 years in sales, and I used to be in the sort of the remodeling construction industry for many of those years, selling high-end Andersen windows. And, for example, I go into a house and try to explain to them that one single up and down window, a double hung window, was $2,500. Do you think they were expecting that? And we're not trained. Most salespeople aren't trained to deal with the reaction of that. We're just trained to keep going and try to how do I handle this objection? How do I handle that objection? And what happens is when you follow that type of corporate training, you just turn into a 20 to 25% closer. And that means 75 out of 100 people will say no to you. And if I had 75 out of 100 people tell me no, I'd jump off a bridge. That's not a successful closing rate. So I started thinking about the psychology of why people buy and the psychology of what the salesperson is actually doing in front of the rep. But the biggest thing for me, what turned the corner for me and where I became a 60 to 70% closing rep, was I started paying attention to body language and what the person's body was telling me as I was speaking. And also what my body language was telling them, sort of as the secondary layer of that. And what I discovered was, first of all, there is no sales training that I've ever found that specifically talks about body language, which is mind-boggling to me because it's such an important thing. But if you're speaking to someone, and you made a very good point, I tell everyone when I train body language, here's the number one thing to remember. And it goes back to the famous TSA slogan that still resonates since 9/11. If you see something, say something. Right? If you see some sort of body language tell, you cannot ignore it. You have to do something about it. And what most reps do is we're trained to sell. We got to make the deal. So we just keep blathering on about our features and our benefits or what's going to be great about this deal that we're trying to put together, when we missed that the person glanced up to his right or she looked down to the floor when you were talking about whatever numbers you were talking about. They internally are not interested, but you just kept talking anyway. And what just happened was you just lost that deal, because now they're internally feeling that you don't understand them, you're not listening to them, therefore I don't want to do business with them. So I have a whole training program on little things to look at. This is not like high level FBI stuff. This is like basic stuff, but it's so important because if you see something, you need to think in your brain very quickly, I probably should address that. And then when you do, then they all of a sudden they feel like you bring them back into the conversation, and then they feel like you're listening to them, even though they have no idea what you just addressed.
And I think that in the real estate business, it's funny because this is not really discussed. I mean, I talk about it in our coaching program. Whenever you're talking to a broker, you're talking to the seller, you're talking to the buyer, or whatever it is, to watch specifically and listen specifically to what they're saying, how they're saying it. Are they crossing their arms? Are they flailing their arms? Are they rolling their eyes? I mean, I don't know if you go into micro expressions. I mean, at one point,
quite a bit.
Yeah, I was raising money for a deal, and there's a guy that was positioning himself like a big shot. And I just told him, the minimum investment is $50,000. And before he could actually say the response, he pulled back the corners of his mouth just a little bit, and I caught it. Mm-hmm. I said the number, and I looked at him, and he like this. So he just pulled back a little bit. If you're watching this on YouTube,
pursed lips,
can see, the pursed lips.
Yeah.
But if you watch on YouTube, you can see what I just did. And I knew that he wasn't going to buy. I knew it. I knew at that point he wasn't able to do it. Right? Because there's a physical thing that I saw, right? Why do you think that it's important for an individual, a real estate entrepreneur, to understand these types of things?
Well, let's just take that example, because I have an example of pursed lips as well. But let's just say you didn't notice that. You might have subconsciously registered it, but you just kept going. You say it's minimum investment is $50,000, and you get this, and this. Once you said $50,000 and he pursed his lips, everything you say after that, he's not listening to anymore. So you literally are wasting not only your time with the next half hour of the presentation, but his time as well, and you're not going to get a deal. But let's say if you did this, let's say he pursed his lips, and you see this happen, and you say, you know what, Peter, let me pause there for a minute. How does everything sound so far? Now, he may have pursed his lips because he realized $50,000, but now you just addressed it at a subconscious level. You didn't say, hey, I just saw you purse your lips. You just say, I love to use the phrase, let me pause here for a minute. How does everything sound so far? And he might say to you, you know what, 50,000 is a little, I can't do more than 25. Great. Now you know, conversation's over and you move on. Or he may have pursed his lips because something else happened. But when you address it, the chances of him or her telling you what's wrong are pretty high. Or at the very minimum, they know you're paying attention to them. because they felt some sort of anxiety or something happened inside them. And you just said, you know what, how's everything going so far? Everything sound okay? And they're going to tell you. In the purse slip story I had a large window sale in front of an elderly couple one night, like in their 60s, not that elderly. But they decided to do it. It was like a $70,000 window job, which is a big sale for me, or back then. And I said, great, how do you guys want to pay for this? You want to look at some financing? You want to do cash, credit card? What do you want to do? And the wife said, we're going to do the 10-year loan at 6.9%. And I saw the husband clasp his hands and purse his lips. Like you said, a micro expression, very quickly. So instead of plowing on like a typical sales rep, okay, let's get going, I said, you know what, guys? Why don't you talk about this? I got to go make a call and check on an installation. I'll be right back. And I went outside and I let them talk. I got back in 5 minutes later. He met me at the door. He put his hand around my shoulder, completely different demeanor. He's like, you know what, Al, we talked about it. We're going to do the 12-month no interest loan. And we went on with the sale. And people asked me, well, they would have changed it anyway. I said, no, if he didn't want to discuss this in front of his wife, and he clearly didn't because he pursed his lips, and we went on with the sale, guess what would have happened when I left? Honey, why did you do the 10-year loan? We didn't want to do that. Now they're arguing, holy shit, we're spending $70,000 on windows. Next morning, it's a canceled sale.
Right. It would have been buyer's remorse, and the sale would have gone nowhere. Exactly.
Right. And it's simply because I saw him purse his lips. So it's that important. These micro expressions, if you're not paying attention to them and you're wondering why, how many times, I'll ask this to your audience, how many times you leave a deal and you think that was great, this is going to go through, and nothing happens? Quite often, right?
Happened to me at least once.
Yeah. It happens because you miss something in their body language. You probably did something wrong, but you did it wrong, and then something happened in their body language that you didn't address, and therefore now you're wondering what the hell happened at the end of that thing, and that's what it is. I can't tell you how important paying attention to body language is.
Absolutely. The thing is that sometimes what I'll do is, as a matter of course, I will ask the broker or ask the seller, what is the most important thing for you? What is the pain point? So just because they're selling a house or selling a property, it doesn't mean they just want the money. Maybe they have something else going on in their life that's not readily apparent, and their body language will say so. Like in your case, this example you just gave right now, the gentleman pursed his lips, clenched his fist. He's clenching his fist like this is like it's a reaction of, oh my God, I need to hold on to this money. It's like it's a physical, almost physical reaction, right?
Yep.
And wincing, right? The wincing, oh, this is so painful.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what they can do. That's why it's like if I have an opportunity to talk directly to the buyer or the seller to address whatever it is that they need, because sometimes it's not always just throw a bunch of money at them or take a bunch of money from them. It's what do they need specifically to make the sale successful? So there's no retrading, there's no buyer's remorse, no seller's remorse, any of that stuff. It's a very, very powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool.
And selling, really buying actually, but selling as well. But buying comes down to the comfort level of the buyer. People don't buy from someone that they're not comfortable with, or they don't buy something that is confusing or they're not comfortable buying. And that's where buyer's remorse comes in. People buy something because they get caught up in the emotion of it, but something deep down in there, they're still not comfortable with. And then they wake up the next morning and they have remorse. And it has nothing to do with, oh my God, I just spent $30,000. That's how they're rationalizing it. But something happened to affect that comfort level. And that's why, and to get rid of that anxious feeling, they cancel the sale. It's the same psychological reason when someone says in a sales situation, I need to think about it. They're saying I need to think about it because they have the anxiety of this guy wants an answer, yes or no. I don't really have the answer yet because I'm not comfortable. But instead of saying no, because human beings don't like to say the word no, they'll say, you know what, I'm going to think about it. And they're not going to think about it. It's just a way to get you away from get through that meeting. So, but once you pay attention to what their body is telling you and you ask, listen, and understand by using open-ended questions, the more comfortable that person is going to be with you, the easier it is for them to say yes. Because at some point they're going to, I really like this guy. I'm pretty comfortable with this. Sounds like a great deal. That's when they're going to say yes. But if they don't feel that, they're not going to say yes.
So now walk us through for an investor out there right now, maybe be listening, walk us through how you would propose they would learn some of these very specific tools and how they could apply it. Aside from the pursed lips, what else do you have that they would be looking out for, and how do you train for something like that?
Hey, my fellow Bulletproof Cash Flow enthusiasts, I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being an integral part of our fantastic community. Your support truly means the world to me and the entire team. If you've been enjoying this valuable insights that we've been sharing here, here's a humble request. Could you please subscribe to the show and leave a review on Apple Music? By doing so, you help us deliver more top-notch content and connect with even more passionate investors just like you. Thank you so much for continued support, and let's jump back into the show.
So what I would recommend to people, obviously they can contact me, but there's, over the last 10 years or so, the resources, especially on YouTube, are plentiful to just go and practice and watch. Watching micro expressions, joining some body language YouTube channels. And don't just stick with one, because some people have different interpretations of body language. So I did a lot, but we mentioned pre-call Joe Navarro, former FBI agent. Terrific couple of books he has out there. This guy was talking about life and death stuff. He was interviewing serial killers. So we will never be in that type of level of a situation where we really have to pay attention. Yeah, let's hope not, right? But Joe Navarro is a great resource. And then Chris Voss, the famous book, Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss was a hostage negotiator. And he talks about the actual power of no. You want people to lead with no rather than leading with yes questions. So these things, but spend time, if you're a good salesperson, if you're a good real estate, investor or whatever you're doing, and you're spending time making yourself better, and hopefully you are, make body language part of that educational process for you. Because trust me, it'll be very, very important. But to answer your question as far as specifics, if you're in a meeting, okay, now quite often you probably are on a Zoom meeting, so you can only see shoulders up. So obviously you're going to look at facial expressions, but it's hard because the face is actually the least accurate piece of the body to read. Because if someone knows what they're doing, like a criminal, they can manipulate their face. Now, for the most part, we're not dealing with criminals, but we could be dealing with some pretty seasoned negotiators who know what to do with their face, but they don't know what to do with their feet, because the feet actually is the most accurate form of body language. So if you're in a person-to-person situation, get in an area where you're standing or you can see their feet when they're sitting, because their feet will tell you exactly how they're feeling. And again, we can spend 2 hours going into this, but just know that the feet are the most accurate. But let's just say you're looking at the face. Watch for facial touching expressions. Those are very good. People usually forget about that. They may give you a fake smile. They may give you a fake surprised look, but sometimes they'll just go like this without thinking about it. And grabbing their ear based on the context of the conversation means they don't like what they just heard. Oh, how much is that investment? Like that. Or they'll just go like this. Here's a great one. Someone does this, the back of their hand. What do you think that means? They're not comfortable. They're anxious about something. And it just could be something like this. But it's so subtle, you may miss it. But if you're talking about terms of the agreement and someone goes like this, yeah, that sounds good. I just lied, but this is telling the truth right here. It doesn't sound good. I'm anxious about it.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorites, besides the pursed lips, I love how the human body works. Did you know that when you lie, the capillaries in your nose expand when you fib?
Oh, really? I had no idea.
So Disney got this right in 1939 when they did Pinocchio.
Yeah.
But they created a wooden dummy that, when he lied, the nose grew. But they actually knew back then, scientists knew, that the capillaries in your nose expand and it makes your nose itch. So sometimes if someone does this when they say something, they're both covering their mouth, but they're also scratching their nose. And again, it doesn't always mean this. Context is everything. However, if I saw that and it was based on an answer that I was trying to get and they scratched their nose when they said it, I would address it wait a minute, let me pause there for a minute. How's everything sound? To make sure I got them telling the truth, because that may mean they lied. So a scratch of the nose could mean they have a cold. So you just got to be careful.
Right. Tell me about the feet. You mentioned the feet. So
Yeah.
what sort of things would you look for? Really, really quick. I know you said it would take 2 hours to explain that.
Well, I'll give you some quick ones. I'm assuming people on this call do networking functions, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You go to networking. Yeah. So networking, you're always standing. If you're talking to someone and their body's facing you, but their feet are facing somewhere else, usually the exit, that means you're boring the shit out of them and they want to get out of there. So if the feet are facing, they're interested and you've got their attention. If they're facing away, you don't have their attention. You got to fix it or you'll be done. Crossing, if you're sitting next to someone and they cross their legs, I love to watch this in a bar when I'm watching a date, two people sitting at the bar. If someone crosses their leg where the thigh is between you and them, that means they're not comfortable. They're blocking you. If they cross their leg and they're open to you, usually they'll turn their body to you, and that means they're interested in what you're saying. So those are the two quick things about the feet. And then one piece of advice I'd give for your own body language, never sit back and cross your arms, or never sit back like this. Always show some interest with slight leaning forward. Lean in a little bit. Even if you're standing, you can lean in a little bit. As soon as you start to go back, people will start thinking you're disinterested or arrogant. And neither one of those is a good attribute to have in a sales conversation.
Absolutely right. Yeah. There's another one too. When you're at a meeting function, men usually stand at 45-degree angles. Like if it's a man to a man talking, but if it's a man to a female, usually they talk straight ahead. It's interesting how that part works too.
Yep. Sometimes and men are they're afraid. Male on male personal space is a big thing. Stuff like that. The other thing to watch for is when you're at a networking function and you see that like group of people, like 4 or 5 people standing in a circle. I always know and you see one person speaking, you can look at their feet and see which one is ready to leave because their feet are not facing the center of the circle anymore. I want some bets on that.
That's so funny. I think we're gonna have a whole bunch of people listening to this. They're gonna be like going to the next event, wondering placing bets, who's gonna leave first, right?
Who's gonna leave first? You just look at their feet and you'll win the bet almost every time.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. I mean, and all this stuff is extremely useful when it comes to negotiation too, because if you understand what's important to them, what's not important to them, what sort of hand gestures are making, what sort of, are they crossing their arms? Are they taking a stand? Men will do that more than women usually cross their arms because it's comfortable for them. So there's different little things you have to know also between the genders as well. But it really is remarkable science. It really is great stuff. It is
great stuff. And
you're training on this, right?
What's that?
You're training this too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've probably done this past year. I've at least 25 to 30 body language, trainings. Most of them in person, but I've done a few online as well. It's a lot of fun in person because I get people up and kind of do a charades kind of thing and have some fun with it. So, but I can come into your company and sit in front of it doesn't have to be your sales team either. It could be body language is important for everyone, really, even peer-to-peer conversations or your personal conversations. I always say this, I ask the question, do you pay attention to body language in your business life as much as you do in your personal life? And people are like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're home, you're in the kitchen and your spouse or significant other walks in. Do they have to say anything before you know exactly how they're feeling? No, you can just take a look at them, right? Or you're at a party and you're across one side of the room and he or she's across the other and you want to get the hell out of there. Do you have to say anything? You just give them a look, right?
That's
and you're like, oh, Agostino wants to leave and you're gone because we live with these people every day. So we understand their body language. That's the kind of level of accuracy you need to get in your professional life. And when you get close to that, I guarantee you'll just be more successful in whatever you do.
Do you think that requires an individual to be a little more adjusted, a little more well-tuned to the folks around them? And I'm only asking this question because there's a lot of business people that I know. They're somewhat, how should I say, selfish. I don't know what else to say. Like they're only thinking about themselves only, and they largely ignore other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how do you train that part of it?
That's a great point, and it's also a great question. And this is always fascinating to me. And they've done this. Is probably at least 5 or 6 studies that I've seen. I'll ask you a question, Augustina. What do you think the number one personality trait for the best salespeople in the world is? What would you say that is?
I would have to say perseverance.
Nope. That's up there. I think it was in the top 10. The number one personality trait for the best salespeople in the world is empathy.
Okay, that makes sense. Sure.
Because they put themselves in their customer's shoes and they understand. So you need to have empathy to be better at body language, to be better at anything. Once you start leading with empathy, a lot of these things that I'm talking about get a lot more easier. If you just keep thinking about yourself, or you go into an appointment saying, I got to make this deal, and that's all I'm thinking about, that prospect will smell that from a mile away. And it smells desperate, and it smells selfish, and you're gonna close 20% of your deals instead of 60%. But when you go and it's all about them, and you ask the right questions, and you make them feel like you're listening to them and understanding them, you're going to close a lot more because you lead with empathy. And then empathy will actually make you better at understanding body language because you'll start to pay attention more. But if you're not empathetic and you're completely selfish and don't care about anyone else, that might work for a little while, but not a good long-term, plan for sure.
That's not going to work. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things in real estate that is lacking is empathy. Try to understand the other individual and what's going through their mind and why making a sale or making a transaction is important to them. It's extremely important. And that's the thing. I mean, I try to instill empathy in my folks. It's actually one of the things that we look for when we're taking students into our program is, do they have that quality? Because if they don't have that quality to begin with, it's going to become a very bad time for them, because the ability to make deals requires that there is some level of empathy. If they're selfish, it's going to be very hard to do deals. Extremely difficult to do any sort of deal.
And
right?
and selfish salespeople don't succeed. They just don't. That's why I hate, you see a lot of these sales groups on Facebook and all this stuff, and all they talk about is, I got the client, I nailed them yesterday, I got a $40,000 deal, and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's not. You'll be gone next year. If that's your thought process, like I nailed Mr. and Mrs. Smith for $40,000 on a solar deal, you should be, I helped Mr. and Mrs. Smith lower their energy bills. Completely different mindset.
Yeah, exactly. I helped them lower their energy bills, and I got paid for it. How about that? That's really cool. That? I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I get it. What they're doing on Facebook is they're trying to pump up their programs to get people to bite and then buy the program. Is usually what they're doing, right? That's what they're doing. They don't really care so much about Mr. Smith and the solar panels or whatever. They don't care anything about that. They just want to say, look how effective our program is. I really do believe that, have the ability to show a great deal of empathy. Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. It makes sense that you have to have empathy in order to and actually care about the outcome of the deal itself. So yeah, I love that. That's super great. That's super great. Are there any resources on your website that talk about this kind of stuff?
So right now my website is it's working, but I'm coming up with a brand new one. So there will be resources. But I do, if you go onto my YouTube page, which you can find through my website, there's a lot of interviews I've done about body language. And then I will be putting together a course early in 2024 about body language. The one I have right now is how to present your price properly, which is more of a consumer-based course than it probably wouldn't be as relevant to the real estate industry. But for me, it's all about the psychology of whatever you do. How are the people thinking? What's going to make them comfortable? And going down those roads, it's never a wrong road to go down when you're leading with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, listen, we covered a great deal of stuff here today. If someone were listening right now and, they're wondering about whether they should get into a program like yours to learn body language, what sort of bulletproof advice would you have to offer them?
I'm always looking for ways to find that passive bulletproof cash flow in my portfolio. Now check out one of my favorite asset classes, net lease. Download my latest book at guide2netlease.com.
Oh, do it. Whether it's mine or someone else's. Like I said, my journey of becoming the typical sales guy when I first got into business to becoming, the number one sales rep in the country for Andersen Windows was because I dedicated myself to education and getting myself better and understanding how human beings work and think. And once I figured that out, I still, like, you stop learning, you die. Like, I'm always trying to do some course. I'm always trying to find new information and judge it against something else that I've seen. So my advice is keep learning, and body language just to be one piece of it. But I think it would be an incredibly important piece because it's just something that's not taught in the typical sales environment of training.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely agree with you. All right, guys, hopefully you got a lot of great information here, specifically about how to read people. The body language of individuals is super, super important. If you focus on the needs of the other individual that you're transacting with, you will win and close more deals. I guarantee it. Okay. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.